Welcome to the 7th part of my Sonic CD US soundtrack theory. In my last part, I talked about how Panic Pass fits in with the US soundtrack. For this part, I'm going to talk about how Collision Chaos Pass fits in with the US soundtrack, including the US Collision Chaos tracks, which, like the US Metallic Madness tracks, were originally arranged by Mark Crew. Anyway, let's start going through the music track of Collision Chaos Pass and compare it to the overall soundtrack. The beginning of this track starts with the use of some orchestral hits that likely inspired the electric guitar riffs used in the Collision Chaos future tracks. There is also a repeating violin used in the beginning that likely inspired the synth used in the US Metallic Madness tracks. This beginning uses a voice sample that could have actually inspired the laughs used in the boss music and the game over theme if you were to pitch it down. The track transitions with some record scratches that possibly inspired the repeating electronic sounds used in Metallic Madness Bad Future. The track now starts to use a flute for the main melody and for one of the harmonies that could have inspired the flute used in the Metallic Madness future tracks and the boss music. There is also a type of harmony used that likely inspired the chime used in Metallic Madness Present and one of the instruments used in the boss music. A deep choir is used throughout this track that likely inspired the deep choir used in the boss music. This deep choir also possibly inspired the deep vocals used in Tidal Tempest and Quartz Quadrant Bad Future. A part of this track uses some bongos that likely inspired the bongos that were used throughout the US Collision Chaos and Metallic Madness tracks. The track then goes into a section that uses a screeching instrument that likely inspired the whispers used in the US Collision Chaos tracks. This screeching instrument also likely inspired the synth used in Wacky Workbench Bad Future and the Game Over theme. There is also a crank sound effect used that likely inspired one of the sound effects used in the boss music. And a subtle electronic harmony is used in this section that possibly inspired the electronic harmony used in the boss music. In this next section, there is a repeating electronic note that could have inspired the shaker sounds used in Tidal Tempest and Quartz Quadrant Bad Future. The track then goes into the last section. Now let's move on to comparing the US Collision Chaos tracks to the past track, starting with the present theme. The track starts with a slow electric guitar melody that is possibly meant to be an arrangement of the flute melody in the first half of Collision Chaos Past. This guitar melody could also be based on one of the harmonies from the past track. The track then uses a piano harmony that could be an arrangement of the deep choir harmony used in the midsection of the past track. The bass in this section could be an arrangement of the flute harmony from the past track. The track then plays the same guitar melody from before, but with a different end note that could still be an arrangement of the flute melody in the first half of Collision Chaos Past. Then the track subtly uses a different piano harmony that is possibly meant to be an arrangement of the flute harmony from the past track. The track then goes into a pitch shift with a slightly different guitar melody that could be based on the third flute melody from the past track that sounds similar to the first flute melody. This section also starts to use a different piano harmony that is likely an arrangement of a certain harmony used in the past track. The track then goes into playing the same slow electric guitar melody from before, but with added drums. Now let's move on to comparing Collision Chaos Good Future to the past track. The track starts with a piano harmony that, like the one in the present theme, is possibly an arrangement of one of the deep choir harmonies from the past track. Then after using an electric guitar melody, it goes into using the bass that could be an arrangement of the same deep choir harmony from before. And the track starts to use an electric guitar melody that could meant to be an arrangement of the flute melody from the last section of the past track. This guitar melody could also be based on the screeching harmony used in the first section of the past track. The guitar melody then follows with a more energetic guitar melody that is possibly meant to be an arrangement of the flute harmony from the past track. Then it plays some long guitar riffs that could be based on the orchestral hits used in the past track. Then the track starts to use an electronic harmony that could be based on the electronic harmony used in the past track. The track now uses a different guitar melody that is possibly meant to be an arrangement of the second flute melody from the past track. Then it goes back to the previous guitar melody from before. Now let's move on to comparing Collision Chaos Bad Future to the past track. The track starts with an electric guitar melody that follows with some guitar riffs that are likely based on the orchestral hits used in the past track. Then the track uses a long guitar riff that is likely based on the repeating violin from the beginning of the past track. The track then uses a pitched up version of the guitar melody from the present theme, followed by the same guitar riffs from before. Then the track goes into a section that uses some guitar riffs that are likely based on the screeching harmony in the second section of the Past track. The bass now starts to sound like one of the other harmonies from the Past track. The track now once again plays a guitar melody followed by some guitar riffs until it ends. And those were all the comparisons I have found between Collision Chaos Past and the US soundtrack. Now it's time to give my overall thoughts and conclusion to this whole Fury video series. I want to first say that I do love the soundtracks of Sonic CD, both the Japanese and US version. I used to think that the US soundtrack was just okay until I grew to appreciate it more in later years, and I feel like this whole theory of mine can make me appreciate it even more. With this theory, I have managed to find more connections to the US soundtrack has to the Past tracks than I ever thought there were to be. Honestly, it felt mind-blowing to really notice all of these similarities, even when at points I thought to have already figured out all of the connections between the tracks. I honestly think that this is a theory that most fans of this soundtrack will like and want to believe in, since it helps to show that this soundtrack had more thought and consistency to it than people think. I also think that people can like this theory because it gives more of a dynamic between the two different soundtracks. It really makes the Past tracks really sound more like a fusion between the Japanese and US soundtracks. And I feel like if you were to replace the instruments of the Past tracks with the instruments used in the US soundtrack, they would sound more fitting alongside both soundtracks and give no reason to make up some original US Past tracks. I feel like there might be people out there who would look at this video series and think that I'm just overly defending this soundtrack that not as much people like through this theory. And for that, I have to say that for anyone who thinks of that in regards to my video series, let me tell you that I don't really care if you are someone who always or never liked this soundtrack. I believe that some people who might have never liked this soundtrack can understand this theory. After going through all this, I strongly believe that with the overwhelming number of comparisons and similarities I have found between the tracks, that the US soundtrack was always meant to be connected with the single Past tracks, despite being originally arranged by the Japanese composers. And if you really don't understand how this could be true, then why don't you just listen through this whole soundtrack again for yourself with this theory in mind. Now I'm going to say what I've been usually saying at the end of these videos, which is that I hope for anyone who watches through this video, and along with the past 6 of them, will share it around. And I guess that will be it in regards to this whole soundtrack theory. Actually, I'm technically not done with all this yet, since within over the next month, I am planning to upload another series of videos that will help to convey more of the likelihood that this theory could be true. And I could probably bet that some of you viewers that are watching this video have always seen some of them.